He's a madman, everybody. Scotty Scheffler back for another week on tour after winning the PGA Championship just a couple of days ago. If you want to bet on Scotty, we have some markets for some fun for you. And how about those key important stats for you to pick the winners? We have that coming up, as well as our picks and best bets for the week at the Charles Schwab Challenge. Let's start with this stat. The greens are going to be hard to hit this week, Will. 6th hardest greens to hit last year on tour. That included the majors. And look at the last 5 champs at this place. They were all in the top 10 hitting greens in regulation that week.
Yeah, Chris, we went through this exercise a little bit a couple weeks ago with the RBC Heritage at Harbortown, where you're thinking cozy confines, tight fairways, small greens. This is the case at Colonial as well, but it's got a little bit more meat on the bone. It's a little harder to score sometimes. Some of it can be weather dependent, but we're back at Hogan's Alley. It's one of the longest running stops on the PGA Tour in terms of annual hosts. And, you know, everyone talks a lot about the horrible horseshoe, 3, 4, and 5, very difficult stretch. But there are other spots on this course, Chris, where it can get away from you in a hurry, especially if you stray off the tee.
That's what we're here to do, folks, to help you pick the winners. We're combining key stats and roundtable here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button there on YouTube to follow along for the rest of the couple of weeks. Will mentioned the fairways, tough to hit. Let's focus on that, combined with the fact that it's just tough to score, period. In fact, if you're talking about fairway birdie percentage, last year on tour, this was the 4th worst birdie or better percentage place from the fairway of anywhere on PGA Tour. And you look at the last 5 champs at this place, at Colonial, all of them were in the top 10 scoring from the fairway, making birdies, and 3 of them, Will, were number 1 overall. So what do you take away from that?
It's definitely going to be a priority. This is a ball strikers venue. Anything tied to Ben Hogan, you think of ball strikers. But I also, for me, I'm pulling up the weather, and I'm seeing that, you know, right now it is definitely early in the week, sunny in Texas, and it looks like it's going to stay pretty sunny the rest of the way. Maybe some storms, hit or miss, you know, Thursday and Friday, and potentially on Sunday. But all this adds up to, Chris, for me, the possibility of firm and fast. That this is not going to be a waterlogged course like the one that we saw Justin Rose take apart back in 2018 or so. You know, Colonial on its own has plenty of, as we're seeing here, tree-lined fairways and dog legs and really tight corners that you have to navigate around. You got to be able to hit the ball both ways. But if we get into the weekend and there hasn't been a lot of precipitation, man, this place is going to get baked out in a hurry, and that's going to add another element that, as we've said, it's going to lean towards ball strikers, people that can control their ball. This is not the longest course on tour. If you're one of the shorter hitters, but you're accurate and you're able to place the ball with a 5 or 6 iron, this is one that you've got circled weeks in advance.
So basically the polar opposite of last week, because last week this seemed like it was just over and over of players having to hit it as far and as straight as they could, figure out how to score from the fairway from there. This week it's going to be more placing your shots. It's a second shot golf course for sure, and your scoring from the fairway is just going to be so important. Back-to-back weeks, Will, where we're going to have emotional issues for these guys on firm and fast fairways.
For sure, and it's one of those things where the issue is if you stray and if you miss off the tee, you're just so often in places at Colonial where you don't really have a shot at these greens. They're elevated, they're small targets, but if you're under a tree, if you're coming from the wrong side of a dogleg, there are a lot of instances, sometimes over water on a lot of these par 4s or around water, where you just don't really have a chance to recover like you would at a course that's more wide open, either in terms of fairway width or just general obstacles. This is one of the more tree-lined courses that folks are going to play on the PGA Tour year in and year out. So it's definitely the place where I'm going to start my handicap, in one of those focal points where you're right. You need to preach patience. You need to have folks that are able to pick their spots and be able to, you know, hit the gas when you need to, but also try and play a little bit safe when you make a bad swing.
So Scotty Scheffler went to the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson, a couple of weeks ago, won for the first time there. It was a big victory for him. And here he goes down the road. Odds are even lower. Scotty at plus 250, it's laughable because you look at players like, oh, Daniel Berger is so happy he's back near the top. He's number 2 on the odds board, and look how far behind he is from Scheffler. But there's quite a few good names here all bunched together in that about 25 to 1 range.
I mean, what are we doing here, Chris? What are we doing? This is ridiculous. This is getting into unprecedented territory. We saw it a couple weeks ago, as you mentioned, at the Nelson where Scotty was in that plus 300 range, and the next closest I think was plus 2,000. Then he goes and wins by 8, ties the tour scoring record, goes to Quail Hollow, wins by 5. So he is on an ultra heater, even by Scotty Scheffler standards. Will be going for a 3rd win in a row for the first time in his career this week. But that's a wild spread to go from plus 250 down to plus 2,200. You got to think from an odds maker's perspective, there's not a lot of incentive to hanging even close to a true number on Scotty, because you know that he's going to get so much public action on a course where, listen, he's played well here before. Mm-hmm. He hasn't won, but he's done everything but. He's finished 2nd twice and 3rd as well over the last 3 years. So, Daniel Berger, Jordan Spieth, both former champions. It's understandable why they're in the mix where they are on the odds board, but it is all going to start with Scotty Scheffler, even though, as you mentioned, this is about as diametrically opposed to a venue from Quail Hollow as we're going to get.
Yeah, it is. And you probably saw some people who said Scotty wasn't a good fit for Quail Hollow. He proved them wrong, just like he's proved them wrong at every other place that he's basically won at. We know why the book is protecting themselves at plus 250. It is what it is. But let's be honest. What's the point of betting on Scotty Scheffler at basically 2-1 to win a tournament with 150 other professional golfers? So if you don't want to do that, and you don't want to bet Scotty at minus money for a top 10 or even worse money for a top 20, again, what's the point? That's why DraftKings has some pretty cool parlays that you could do with Scotty Scheffler and some other players. So what we're going to do today, our DraftKings parlay with Scotty Scheffler. Pick Scheffler for a top 10 with one of these other 4 golfers. Tommy Fleetwood at plus 350, Hideki Matsuyama 360, Brian Harman 600, Bud Cauley, interesting guy on this list, plus 700. Again, both of them, Scotty and that player, have to get a top 10 in your parlay. Which one catches your eye?
I mean, Scotty being in Thanos mode, I don't think we have to sweat him being in the top 10.
I was just going to say, what if he doesn't get top 10? I mean,
we'll
that
write
possible?
that in pen, not pencil. Listen, we can talk about this in a few minutes. I'm out on Hideki Matsuyama. I don't really love him this week for a course fit perspective and given his recent form. So I'm going to the guy next door. Give me Brian Harman, former major champion, not the longest hitter on tour, but this is not a course where you need to be super long. This is a tactical, surgical strike sort of venue. That speaks Brian Harman to me. And over the last few years, he's played here really well and really consistently. Has been outside of the top 31 only once in his last 9 starts at Colonial. A lot of T17s, T12, T22, but he did throw a couple of top 10s in there. So I really like Brian Harman. Give me that plus 600. I think he's the pick of the litter with these 4.
You know what's funny about Brian Harman? The guy won about a month ago. And with Rory winning the Masters and Scotty doing what he's been doing for the last 3 weeks, people have forgotten that Brian Harman won a golf tournament about a month ago. And when you're talking about how consistent he has been, 6-1 odds looks really good to me as well. Hideki, he's too random right now with how up and down he's been. I mean, since Century, it really has been tough sledding for Hideki, if you want to be realistic about that. And then Tommy Fleetwood, you might remember last week I picked him for a top 20, and he just did what Tommy's been doing every week lately, the last couple of years. So he looks okay for 2 rounds, and he gets up there pretty good and then just cannot stay consistent, and really was lucky to stay relatively in the mix for a top 30, top 40 on Saturday and Sunday last week. I don't trust Fleetwood for a top 10 nearly as much as I trust Brian Harman. Bud Cauley is the one that kind of catches my eye there at plus 700 because he's been an under-the-radar guy as well. Did you want to touch that one at all for better money?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a better price for Bud, and he has been really surging in 2025. But I think I'm going to lean more on Harman with a more consistent track record at Colonial. And as you mentioned, he won about a month ago. Where did he win? In Texas. What kind of course? Ball Strikers course. TPC San Antonio. It's not apples to apples to Colonial, but there are a lot of similarities with the shots that you need around that place and what he's going to need at Colonial. So I'll take my chances with Brian Harman, even if you want a little bit of a better return with Bud Cauley.
Well, I'm seeing why Harman and Cauley are pretty similar, because Cauley was T5 at Texas. He was T6 at the Players' Championship, and he had a couple of other top 20s, top 30s. So Brian Harman sounds good to me. You mentioned Hideki Matsuyama and not feeling too high on him. You're exploiting the market here this week, Will.
Let's go flag hunting with the Team Japan. Top Japanese. I'm going to go Ryo Hisatsune. It's a 3-man market with Hideki, Hisatsune and Takumi Kanaya. I will say I was out at Quail Hollow last week. It was my first time in person to watch Ryo Hisatsune on the greens where he takes a sip of water and the caddy's got the water jug like on his hip pocket and he's got to take the sip of water and he holds it in his mouth while he putts. Absolutely fascinating dynamic. I would love to know how he came up with that one, but he has been really solid. He's been inside the top 40 a bunch over his last few starts, including making the cut last week at the PGA Championship, which we can't say the same about Hideki Matsuyama. That was the first time in 19 majors that he had a trunk slam on Friday. That was the longest active streak on tour. So now it's up to Xander at 13 instead of Hideki at 19. But Chris, you mentioned it a few minutes ago. Hideki comes out, he shoots 75 million under par, winning the Century in January in the first start. And everyone's like, wow, he's going to go and he's going to win the Sony that he's already won before. He's going to take both Hawaiians events and the year is on. And he kind of disappeared on us. Even when you go back to Riviera, a place where he was the defending champion, he didn't really put much together. And now he really is, for his standards of a major champion, a guy that we saw win in the playoffs last year, a decorated veteran. He is not up to snuff. And I think that, odds makers are still leaving him as a minus money favorite in this three-man market. I'm getting plus 240 on Ryo Hisatsune. And again, Hideki has not played here since 2014. He did finish top 10 that week. He finished tied for 10th. So he knows his way around Colonial. But, man, that's 11 years without seeing this golf course. You wonder, why are you adding it to the schedule? What are you trying to find? Are you digging it out of the dirt? So I really think there's an opportunity here to go the other way with another Japanese player.
Hideki was a kid back then, too, when he was playing that event. So I like that one as well. Okay, follow my math here, my top 10. Pretty good number, plus 320 for J.J. Spaun. I'm looking at the course that he is playing and where he has played well in the past. Spaun is great with his irons. We mentioned off the top of the show, you got to be great with your irons. Well, he is 4th strokes gained on the approach. Awesome. And he's top 25 in greens in regulation. Also awesome. Where has he played his best? Let's go over this. Would you call Cognizant at PGA National a second shot golf course?
Yep.
Okay. You'd call the Players, Sawgrass, a second shot golf course?
For sure.
Second place at both of those events. Not even close anywhere else. Those two, he has shined. He should have beaten Rory at the Players. I love his iron game here. And Spaun, Will, is the kind of guy who you see him hit the ball sometimes, and you're wondering how he's not a top 10 player in the world every week.
And I was actually intrigued last week at watching him at Quail Hollow. He was popping up in spurts where he was like, hey, J.J. Spaun's back in the mix, and he's on the leaderboard. Actually finished the week 15th in strokes gained off the tee, which is a little bit of a surprise for me, given, as you said, he's more of an iron player, and you feel like he is a guy that capitalizes on second shot golf courses. So now you have a situation where you don't need as much firepower off the tee, but you still are leaning on that accuracy, tee to green, which he tends to have in spades. So it is one that piques my interest there. If this could be a course along the lines of the ones where he has played well earlier this year, and especially PGA National, a little less water at Colonial than PGA National. But yeah, J.J. Spaun, he showed up in spurts at Quail Hollow. If he's able to have a more consistent performance, I think that he could have a really high ceiling this week.
So if we're going to pick some winners, we have to address the elephant in the room every week after a major. It's the emotional letdown that players feel, the fatigue if they're in the mix the week before. How do they do the following week? I was waiting for you to pick somebody who wasn't on that leaderboard last week, but here we are.
Well, here's the thing. Not all runner-ups are created equal. Harris English was like back home in Georgia when that tournament finished. He was done 5 hours before Scotty Scheffler. It's not like he was waiting around in case there was a playoff. He was done and dusted, and he said, if I need to turn the plane around, I will. So this is not one where he's got to worry about having stayed late on Sunday, and he's got all the momentum from that final round 65, and now he's heading back to a course where he was a runner-up 9 years ago. It's crazy. This was 9 years ago when Jordan Spieth won and Harris English finished T2, but he's got another top 5 finish at Colonial. This fits that sort of mold, similar to what you were saying with J.J. Spaun of, the type of course where you feel like a player like Harris English who does well in U.S. Opens, heavy on the ball striking power and prowess. So I think that this is a great combination of course fit to his skill set with a little bit of momentum. And I don't think that he really tapped into a ton of the energy last week, because it's not like he was sweating the weekend of like, oh, I'm in the mix, I could win a major. He came out of nowhere on Sunday, where even when he finished, it looked like he was going to finish 10th. He ends up finishing 2nd. So not all of those finishes are created equal, where I think he's got a lot of the positives off of last week without burning himself out at all.
Your winner and my winner are such different golfers, but they share a similarity where the mental fatigue is not going to be there from the PGA. Even though Maverick McNeely, my winner, was up there a little bit during the week on Thursday and Friday of the PGA. I like that. It means he's gaining a little bit of confidence. And this is a player. We do not realize how well he's been playing this year. I mean, he already has 3 top 3 finishes this year in events, and some of them big events. So it's not like Maverick McNealy's just sitting there, barely trying to get top 20s and top 10s. This guy is right there on the precipice of the top of the leaderboard on many weeks out of the year. I like sprinkling both of those in. He's had some great finishes. He had some great moments at the PGA Championship. Oh, by the way, irons are his strength as well. I don't like the fact that a guy with his name is plus 3,300. That's just where we're at with this field. But I do like the fact that McNealy kind of checks a lot of those boxes for me.
Yeah, it's a Scheffler factor with all the prices of these 5 or 6 favorites behind him, as we mentioned, and it definitely adds a little bit of an element to the handicap. It was fascinating coming into 2025, wondering how Maverick McNealy was going to follow up that maiden victory at the RSM. It was a quick turnaround. All of a sudden, he's in the Century. He nearly won the Genesis. I mean, if Ludwig doesn't get ultra hot on Sunday, it's probably Maverick McNealy winning a signature event, and that really would have changed how we viewed him. Still looking for that second win, and you're right, there are some pieces to this that would make you think that McNealy is someone to focus on. You look back at the recent winners, whether it's what Davis Riley did last year, or Grillo, or even Daniel Berger back in 2020. I still, in my mind, it's hard for me to overcome the West Coast bias. I feel like Maverick McNealy is a name that I reach for early in the year when we're out on the West Coast, and not someone that really pops for me as much when we're into the Middle America. And even though he got his win down in coastal Georgia, so maybe that's on me. Maybe I need to tweak my model a little bit and not just pigeonhole him into Stanford country up there.
To be fair, the fall is a little different than playing in February and playing in January. That's for sure. We do not agree very much on this show, but when we do, we want to celebrate it. And what we're going to celebrate here is our consensus long shot and why we love Ben Griffin at 65-1.
I feel like I should be putting on some sunglasses here. If we're going to talk about Ben Griffin, we got to have the hater blockers out. The guy's on a heater. I mean, he teams with Andrew Novak to win the Zurich. It was a great, week of camaraderie. Both of them get their first win on tour. And he's continued with, the great play. Finished T8 last week at the PGA Championship and is just in the midst of a career year, racking up a bunch of top 10 finishes, got in the winner's circle. Now he's really able to kind of change gears in where the season is, where he's going to start focusing on the playoffs and really making a push to be in that top 30 at East Lake. So plus 6,500 here on a course where, again, this is one where if you're not the longest hitter on tour, you probably have it circled of this, Travelers, if you're in the signature events, Harbor Town, venues that that you're going to be able to capitalize on and really make a move. And I think that this definitely fits that mold for Ben Griffin.
He's still got a chip on his shoulder, too, because I think these players realize when they say, oh, your first victory on tour was a team event, though. Some people say, oh, that doesn't count. He's got a chip on his shoulder. And I think he's the kind of player who still has that motivation to get that first individual victory. And like you had mentioned, the moments that he had at a tough course last weekend translates well to me. Let's do this. If we are even close on Ben Griffin, if you want to put him in a top 5, a top 10, and we get you some money out there, how about we'll start agreeing some more?
Yeah, show us the slips.